When I was 18, I watched the ocean glow blue under my feet. And when I went back years later, it didn't glow at all. And for a while, I thought the place had changed. It didn't. After graduating high school, I moved to Savannah, Georgia. I heard there were street performers out there, so as a young musician, it seemed like as good a business strategy as any. I made friends with an artist pretty quickly and spent most of my time with him. We painted badly, we sculpted worse, and we wrote poetry that's thankfully now resting peacefully in a landfill somewhere. We would invent characters and spend the entire day pretending to be them. Eventually, we got a license to busk, which was great because I was basically never broke. If I ever did run out of money, I just picked a park square and played some songs, and eventually some tourists would pass by and slip a 20 in my jar like they were feeding some zoo animal. I only ever needed enough to afford cheap, greasy food, and then I would just pick a park square and listen to the ghost tour guides make up stories on the fly. The spirits of people hung from this tree won't let the Spanish moss grow on it anymore. They just pulled it down, by the way. I watched them do it. Spoiler. Life collapse at this time was theoretical, mostly because mine wasn't substantial enough for anything to really be at risk. Another street performer was this guy everyone called Bob with a banjo on his back. Bob felt like part of the environment. He looked as though he'd stepped off a freight train in 1932 and just wandered into the wrong century. He'd sing Wagon Wheel in this barely audible raspy voice while strumming clumsy chords, which only seemed to add to his charm, honestly. It was easy to imagine that he had always been there, part of the scenery in the same way that the park statues were. I didn't have the lens yet to see the difference. One night, some friends and I decided to sleep on the beach, and our nighttime dip turned surreal when the water would glow blue as we dragged our feet through it. Bioluminescent plankton. My friend ran into the ocean, drunk and naked, certain that he'd be swimming in it, but after about 100 yards, the water didn't even reach his knees. He just sat down, defeated, glowing faintly between the moon and the water. It was just glimmering with these specks of blue. With no car, no savings, and no life that could meaningfully fall apart, it's really hard to remember any moments of real concern. And Savannah remained in my memory over the years like something preserved under glass. But when I went back when I was 26, there was no glow. I went back to the beach during the daytime and noticed that the water was this kind of unappealing, murky brown. And Bob was nowhere to be found. And the bars were still bars. It took me a while to realize that the city hadn't betrayed me, but the version of me that it once collaborated with didn't exist anymore. Partly because at 18, I didn't really experience risk the way that I do now. Failure was indistinguishable from trying, and I didn't know the rules that responsible adults lived by, so I wasn't supervised by them. But now, I know more. I know how long things take. I know stability is fragile, and looking back, I can see that Bob wasn't just a character or part of the scenery. He was someone who was surviving. Knowledge doesn't just illuminate, it supervises. And then every action is preceded by a calculation, like financial math, or relational math, or future math. Because without it, you're always risking collapse. And it's this kind of collapse that has a blast radius, that makes you reconsider what you're even willing to do. The plankton wasn't always there, it only shows up under certain conditions. You'd have to be there at night to even see it. The water would have had to been calm for some time before, and the glow required motion and contact. At 18, I went to the beach at night because I had nothing else to do. And I walked in because I was from the desert, and I had only seen the ocean a handful of times before. So why wouldn't I? But now I'm in my 30s, and the pull of novelty is weakened. If I were at that same beach today, it's doubtful that I'd even make it into the water. I'd probably check the time and consider traffic. I'd picture sandy socks and the process of cleaning out the floorboard of my car and just pass. That glowing plankton isn't exactly a common thing to experience, but it is an impossible thing to experience without seeking out the conditions that actually make it visible. Younger me wandered, so everything could surprise me. Now I edit out surprise on purpose. I'll have pre planned where I'm gonna stay, what I'll eat, and what stops I even have time to squeeze in. At 18, I walked into the water, and now I save myself from the hassle of sand. And it made me notice that exposure changes behavior, and behavior changes what reveals itself. It's like when you learn a new word and you start hearing it everywhere. It's not like the world suddenly just decided to start using that word. You just started noticing it because your attention widened enough to include something else to listen for. It's easy to feel like we miss youth. And I thought I missed Savannah. But what I think I actually missed was a life that was just smaller. I won't pretend that that's something I actually want back. I mean, sure, things were interesting, but now things matter. But I do feel like some of the adult rules that we adopt might be more optional than they feel. But the version of me that it once collaborated, motherfucker.